Whenever there's a murder, it's the job of detectives to find out who the killer is and how they killed. And often it's forensic evidence which provides the clues.
The finding of his DNA wasn't just on the murder weapon, it was on a most important part of the murder weapon.
This evidence was the breakthrough that we needed.
The forensic evidence in this case was crucial.
In this series, we shine a light on how cutting-edge forensic techniques and the power of science brought the most dangerous killers to justice.
A truly horrific criminal, a monster.
It's a hammer blow. You don't know how you're going to carry on.
We'll hear how some of the most disturbing crimes were solved thanks to the tiniest fragments of evidence.
He basically said to me, she's in the house, go and find her.
The amount of blood that was there indicated that there was a frenzied attack.
There was no reasonable explanation for them if that's why he changed his plea.
And how even the most forensically aware of killers couldn't beat the experts and hide their crimes.
The key thing about having a DNA profile is you've got probably the sharpest tool in the box.
I was so elated beforehand. We didn't have the evidence and all of a sudden we'd cracked it.
In this episode, a brutal and bizarre murder is committed on allotments in North London.
They can see a lawnmower cord that is attached to the lawnmower and wrapped around Leah's neck.
A crime scene rich with forensic clues.
There was a likelihood that whoever had assaulted Leah had locked that padlock afterwards. We needed to know who that person was.
A killer close to home.
Everything would suggest that might have been the actions of a killer who knew her because they couldn't look at what they'd done.
And a family that would never be the same again.
It's like everything stops. And everything falls apart. You don't know how you're going to carry on.
This is Forensics, Catching the Killer.
It's pitch black and the weather is raining. They go into the allotments and they phone Leah's phone. And one can only imagine how the family would have felt at this moment because they can hear the phone ringing. They ring it again and it's coming from the mower shed.
On a rainy night in February 2017, police in Colindale, North London, received a report that 8-year-old Leah Adri-Siyoko had been reported missing by her 2 adult daughters. The search had brought them to a place Leah loved, Colindale Allotments. Noel McHugh was one of the Metropolitan Police's top senior investigating officers from the Specialist Crime and Operations Homicide Unit.
The police officers, their priority is to preserve life. They're thinking at this time, quite reasonably, has she tripped over, has she injured herself? And there's a chance that they could save her life. So they get an enforcer from the car and this heavy-duty padlock takes some effort. They smash this lock, but in there they see what is quite clearly a body and it's covered with a blue coat. They pull off the coat and they can see a lawnmower cord that is attached to the lawnmower and wrapped around Leah's neck. The family recognise that not only is this the phone that's rung in there, but this is their mother. And so the officers have got to move to preserving life, if they can. So they cut the cord. Part of that cord will retract and go back into the housing of the machine. And they try to preserve life. And regrettably, that was not to be. She's already dead.
Life for Leah's family would never be the same. Her son Mark was at his home in West London at the time.
It was Tuesday morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. I got a phone call from my sister. So basically I'm lying in bed, I've answered the phone. She says, "Mark, are you sitting down?" I said, "Well, I'm just in bed." So I'm lying down. And she said, something's happened to Mum. She's dead.
Officers on the ground moved quickly to turn the allotments into a crime scene.
They then got to build up an investigation, put in cordons to preserve the evidence that's around Leah, around the shed, start some fast-track actions. So they will call the CID, who will then establish there's something suspicious quite clearly. You know, elderly ladies do not strangle themselves with lawnmower cords in sheds. And they will call the homicide assessment team, who will send out a car to do an assessment, stand up the fast time actions, and then build up the forensic response.
Despite only having been reported as missing a matter of hours earlier, Leah's disappearance had been immediately worrying.
Leah was reported missing after concerns started to grow about her whereabouts when she didn't turn up for a meeting.
In 2017, Tristan Kirk was a reporter at the London Evening Standard newspaper.
She wasn't the kind of person to miss meetings or to not be in a place where she said she was going to be. An allotment's not the kind of place that you would find a murder case traditionally, especially not in London. We are sadly accustomed to street crime, gang violence, even gun violence, but the idea of somebody being strangled to death in the shed on the allotment is I would hazard a guess, a one of a kind.
The next day, Met Police crime scene manager Andrew Langley was dispatched to take control of the allotments and secure any necessary evidence. His priority was setting up a secure crime scene behind police cordons and protecting it from the elements.
Once you get beyond that cordon tape, there shouldn't really be anybody there. That's my domain. So to carry out that initial assessment, is the scene likely to be compromised by weather? Are there things that we need to get in place really quickly in order to preserve them? Are there things there which might lead to an early identification of whoever may be involved? Certainly in an instance like that, the padlock that's on the outside of the door, that's an immediate thing that springs to mind. How are you going to preserve that padlock? Are you going to submit that padlock to forensic specialists to have a look at in advance of everything else? The building that Leah was found in, certainly the roof wasn't secure. They weren't aware of that during the night before because it was dark, but the roof wasn't secure. It was open to the elements in some parts. So in that case, yes, you would have to re-secure that. You would have to, whether it be by putting a board over it, getting contractors in, whether it just be simply putting a tarpaulin over it just to make sure that no rain gets in. But that comes with its own issues, because you have to, using a tarpaulin, how do you fix a tarpaulin down? What happens if the wind gets up?
For Noel McHugh, who had been involved in over 20 years of murder investigations, it was a staggering and unusual case from the start.
What struck me, and this is just before I go to see the family, of how it seemed so wrong and disturbing that there was 100 metres or so from her house, a place that she loved. You've got that Edgware Road that is so busy with probably hundreds of cars every minute going along it. To the right, you've got Hendon training school. And it just seemed so wrong that something so awful could have happened so close to so many possibilities to prevent it.
Noel's next task was to speak to Leah's family.
He sat down with us and said, we will do everything we can to find out, well, to solve the murder of your mother. It's a kind of hammer blow of a word to hit you. It's like everything stops and everything falls apart. And you don't know how you're going to carry on or what you're going to do. And you just try and find something to cling on to, and you don't always find it. You just almost, broken by it.
In late February 2017, police in North London had been called by the family of a missing 80-year-old woman. She was found just hours later in the shed of the allotments where she spent much of her spare time. Leah Adru-Siyoko had been strangled to death with a lawnmower cable. Now, Metropolitan Police detectives were looking for her killer in the leafy suburb of Colindale, where the huge area of allotments were.
Of course, Colindale's towards the edge of London. It's got areas of quite nice leafy areas. It's towards the edge of London, so it's the kind of environment that you'd expect of that kind of suburb area of London. It's also got some what you would consider more inner city development. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but what there are actually is quite a lot of allotments around Colindale and the surrounding areas of Harrow.
Why would you come to this area? You've got to have a reason. You've got to have a connection with the area. It's February, it's pouring with rain, so if some random killer had come to this area, he would have to know that the allotments existed, he'd have to know that there would be a victim there, and why would you come there?
And why would anyone want to murder a woman who was loved by friends and family alike? Leah had lived in Colindale for 40 years and had raised her children there.
She was probably the most sensible, stable person I ever in my life. She didn't cause dramas, she didn't have dramas, she never overreacted or underreacted to things. She was just steady and secure, and she was the heart of the family. Even up to my 50th birthday and stuff, dealing with everything in your life all the way through, I knew that if I went to my mum's house, I could sit with her. She may not have the answer, but I would always feel better. I would feel safe. I would feel secure. And I had that feeling from my mum my whole life, from when I was a child. I was a mummy's boy, I suppose, and I always loved being with my mum.
Leah's second great love after family was the allotments where she spent much of her time, especially since the death of her husband Tony after 47 years of marriage. Keeping herself busy since his death, she had become secretary of the allotments committee.
She'd always liked gardening, because we used to grow things in the garden. Just having more space to actually do it in, she really enjoyed. And it got her out of the house. She took on the secretary role and loved it. She enjoyed meeting the people, she enjoyed dealing with those people, meeting new people, helping them, making them feel welcome.
I can't find anybody that's had a bad word for her. Well, we were all absolutely shocked. I think the site was shut down for a while.
Gordon Kerr owns an allotment on another nearby site.
I can't imagine what it would have been like to be on that committee and think, what could I have done to try to head this off or prevent it in some way.
Trying to understand how complicated the scene is, and just to take it in that you're in the middle of Colindale. Just beyond there is the green of the allotments, which then opens up hugely into many, many plots in that particular area. There's over 120 allotments in there. It was the size and scale that was quite overwhelming at the start, because I'm thinking, how are we going to deal with this? how are we going to interpret this? How are we going to trace all of the people? And then we just look across the road and we've got all of the houses. So we've got conventional house to house, and we've got a new house to house that we have developed around the allotments. And the problem, the challenge we've got is if it was a house or a shop, you know, there'd be normally CCTV in and around that area, or you'd have a witness or a car. This is February, it's been pouring with rain that day. It's quite an isolated area. Every bus has got CCTV, they've got probably 18 to 24 cameras on them that look inwardly and outwardly. Now you want to gather that. Now if you can say a bus passed at 3 o'clock or 3:05, perfect, they'll give you that bus. But I was wanting the buses over a 3-hour period, which was quite a few buses.
In the hunt for witnesses, one was of particular importance.
One of the most striking things that has come back to me now is reading the statement of the witness who saw Leah, and it was around the 2:30 point where she's coming generally from her home address to the allotments, and that is the last sighting of her. But we know it was her because he knew her. He described her bouncy silver hair, those wellies with the polka dots on them. That's a hard statement to read because that's the last person to see her alive.
Meanwhile, the post-mortem had been carried out on Leah's body, and the findings were crucial to the investigation.
The post-mortem on Leah provided many of the answers that we were looking for. We were able to get to the bottom of what was going on with the ligature. It was at that point that we realised the significance of the lawnmower pull cord, and the fact that the toggles from Leah's clothing were just basically caught up in that main ligature, which was consistent with that lawnmower cord. There were a number of bruises. There were grip-type bruisings, a number of right-sided rib fractures, and a fracture to the neck, which was significant because it also had some associated bleeding, which meant that we knew that that was consistent with an assault sort of type injury rather than something that had happened after she had died in the handling of the body between the scene and the mortuary. The fact that there was bleedings indicates that there's some blood pressure, so you would only have that while somebody was still alive.
The shed where Leah had been found provided many clues too. One was the simple placing of a coat over her head.
Everything would suggest that might have been the actions of a killer who knew her because they couldn't look at what they'd done, or there was some kind of momentary regret. But it was interpreting a really complicated scene. Question, shall we seize the doors? And yes, of course, because the padlock has been already smashed to force entry, and then we take the doors off.
But the most significant of clues were that padlock and the set of keys which could lock it.
Amongst Leah's possessions, we found her keys to the padlock. The padlock was locked from the outside, so that ruled out Leah's keys. In the early stages, of course, we didn't know whether somebody had deliberately locked that padlock to conceal Leah, or whether somebody had locked that padlock not knowing that Leah was inside the shed. The padlock and how it had been locked was obviously of great importance because there was a suggestion, a likelihood that whoever had assaulted Leah, or certainly somebody who knew Leah was there, had locked that padlock afterwards. We needed to know who that person was.
What's so significant is there are 4 keys to it. There is 2 other key holders who are significant members on the allotment committee. We have spoken to them and they've accounted for their keys. There's another key, that's in Leah's pocket. Now, the other key is Rahim Mohammadi's key, which he is in possession of, so 4 keys. Why is that so important? The padlock that has been smashed by the police officers to get in to save Leah's life would open and close with the key in it. So it's not a snapshot one, you need the key to open and shut it. We built up a mini major inquiry around these keys. And the scientist actually phoned me back and said, you want me to do what? I want you to rebuild the lock to prove that this is the mechanism and the confidence level around it. And what would be in our favour is some keys are similar. You know, you might put a particular key in, and with wear and tear on the barreling, another key might work. But you've got 4 keys here.
This process of rebuilding the lock meant only one thing. The key that locked Leia's body in the shed belonged to Rahim Mohammadi.
If you take a random suspect, they would have committed the murder. They would have taken the keys from Leia's pocket. They would have locked the door. They would have climbed back in through a hole in the roof where there is no disturbance to support that they've climbed through the roof. They put the keys in the pocket to climb back out through the roof to then go. Highly improbable, you would suggest. Leaves us with one set of keys that's in Rahim Mohammadi's pocket.
Who was Rahim Mohammadi? And could these keys unlock the secrets of Leia's murder? In March 2017, detectives in the North London suburb of Colindale, led by DCI Noel McHugh, were investigating the murder of 8-year-old Leia Adri-Siyoko. Leia had been found strangled to death with a lawnmower cable in a shed at the allotments where she loved to spend her time. The door to that shed had been locked with Leia inside it, and she was one of only 4 people to have keys to the lock. One of the other 3 was a man called Rahim Mohammadi, who was also on the allotments committee. And as Noel soon discovered, he had a history of disagreement with Leia.
So Rahim portrayed himself as a cornerstone of the allotments. You know, he was there to help, he was the dispute resolver. He was, I would describe him in my mind, he's Santa's little helper. He's always there, he's a right busy bee. If there's something going on, he will be there to get involved because the allotments are his life and he's obviously got that pride and love. We are aware, because when I met the family on the evening that we took the investigation over, that there had been a dispute between Leia and Rahim, and this was around September 2016, where there had been a allotment meeting.
We have a meeting every year. We encourage plot holders to raise their concerns, but you know, no plot holder should feel that they can make the rules. But obviously there are disputes that arise over things that can get out of hand. There was a dispute at a committee meeting a few weeks prior to the dreadful day when Leia and Mohammadi fell out, and he was kind of given a warning as to his future conduct.
What started as a discussion became a disagreement, but he was quite volatile, aggressive in his tone, and inappropriate to speak to anyone like that, let alone an 80-year-old lady who could be his mum or our grandmother. You know, it's like totally wrong. So you had question marks over that. There was a long tail to that argument, and he then sent some emails because he just didn't let that argument go, and it seemed disproportionate that someone would get so exercised over an allotment.
When Noel and his team investigated the contents of those emails and the background to the dispute, they discovered an irrational power struggle that in no way could justify a murder.
There were issues with other occupants. He wanted Leia to deal with things differently. He wanted a more forceful approach. He saw himself as more of an authority. There were what we would call minor incidents that in Rahim's mind, they were really important. He had that argument in September with Leia. He wants to have more power in the allotments, and this lady is well respected. She's not going anywhere, and she's holding her own. And this is irritating him, and he's feeling undermined. However, that doesn't make him a suspect. It just is odd behaviour. And in any murder investigation, you will have people that do things that are, in the scheme of things, might seem that's odd or out of character, but that doesn't make them a suspect at that time.
But Rahim Mohammadi was certainly a person of interest.
And so we go in and speak to him, and you're listening to how he has, formed a friendship with Leah.
Mohammadi's account of his interactions with Leah that day, who he claimed was his friend, were detailed but strange.
He arrived at the allotments that day by tube. He's travelled from Hackney, where he lives. He's gone on to, it's pouring with rain, and there is CCTV of him with a newspaper over his head. He's gone to Leah's house, which is a corner house. He's gone in by the back door. Now, we know from the family that Leah was cautious of him, polite but cautious. She would keep a distance. So immediately you've got some, did she really invite you in for a coffee? Mohammadi goes off and he does his affairs on the allotments. Later that afternoon, he says he has cause to go back to the house. So this is a little bit odd. He doesn't go into the house, but Leah is there. He goes off on his affairs, he goes back, and he then makes a number of journeys backwards and forwards to the nearby shops.
The last witness sighting of Leah was at about 2:30 that afternoon. Her friend had started calling her repeatedly to no answer at just after 6 p.m. So if Mohammadi's account was true, it must have all fitted into the hours between those times. Noel and his team then met to discuss this bizarre account of Mohammadi's movements that day.
So in this meeting, it's day 2 of the investigation, and we're moving to I think it was the 3rd interview that we've got Rahim. And that's not abnormal, that we would go back to witnesses, because there'll be more detail that's coming from the witness, from the family, from the investigation. He's saying, oh, I saw a red car here, and it's almost a chuck-away comment. He's placing a bit of a crumb trail to distract us. He says that he has brought back this measuring tape because Leah wanted to have a new carpet and she wanted to measure the carpet on the stairs. And I thought, this is like extraordinary detail for someone who has died. And when the family liaison officer, I said, just put a phone call into Leah's daughter and see, was she getting a new carpet? And remember the response, she couldn't afford to get the roof fixed, let alone the carpet, which was threadbare. He also said that he may have gone upstairs because you might find my, fingerprints there. At this point, I'm starting to say, you've now got my attention.
Inquiries are underway to try and corroborate what he said. Does what he say make sense? And part of that was that he visited Leah's house on the day that she was killed. So we examined the house. Was there any trace of Mohammadi there? But there wasn't. We didn't find anything. So the fact that you didn't find Mohammadi's DNA or Mohammadi's fingerprints in Leah's house doesn't mean he hasn't been there. But it's something you need to do.
And then we recheck, what did he do on the day afterwards? So he has been to Leah's house. He's been in and out of the allotments. He's then gone home. The next day, he travels with a friend to the allotments, and there's police tape. Now, bearing in mind, he is obsessed with the allotments. Does he get out of the car? Does he go and speak to the officer? Does he get involved? No. He decides to do a return journey home. He doesn't even go to Leah to say, what's happened? Her house is 100 metres away. There's a police officer actually outside the house. There's total disinterest, almost extraordinary.
In the meeting Noel held with his detectives, all the information that his team had collected was leading to one inevitable conclusion.
We were all computing it in our head, and it was like the 3 cherries coming up on a slot machine, and you go, right, he's a suspect, go and nick him. Where is he now? And she said, well, I've got him coming in for another statement. How long? That's in 15 minutes. So we organise a blue light car to get moved across London as quickly as possible to get control of him, to arrest him.
With a suspect now in custody, the forensic investigations continued.
A lot of forensic work isn't quick. Sometimes it takes an awful long time to do it. And other inquiries are now progressing, particularly with regards to the lawnmower and the pull cord from the lawnmower.
So significant because it's an old mower, it's in the shed, it's been covered up with a blue coat, and it's been there since before 2016, maybe before. But so the killer would have had to know that there's a lawnmower there. So if it's a random attack, you've suddenly come across this lady, and then you've come across a method to kill her with a cord. Bearing in mind there's numerous items, implements that you could have used to a blunt force trauma or a stabbing type injury. But in understanding that mower, we had to trace down the Mountfield mower, and there were none to buy. So we had an officer go onto eBay. He's been hunting for it, and then he's bidding, right, for it on eBay. So he's won the bid.
Now, with an identical lawnmower to analyse and compare to the actual lawnmower which Leah had been killed with, detectives could start to assess what linked Mohammadi to the murder weapon. It was March 2017, and police in Colindale, North London, had arrested someone on suspicion of murdering 80-year-old Leah Adri Siyoko by strangling her with the cable of a lawnmower and leaving her body locked in the shed of the allotment she loved. The clues of that lawnmower were plentiful and leading Metropolitan Police detectives very much to the man now in custody, Rahim Mohammadi.
One of Mohammadi's roles that he particularly enjoyed on the allotments is that he would mow the borders between all the allotments. He would keep those grass verges neat and tidy. So he was the main user of that lawnmower, and as such, you might expect, quite rightly, that his DNA would be all over the pull cord for that lawnmower. But in this instance, what we did was we took it all apart and we looked to see, when you were starting a lawnmower on a pull cord, how far does that cord come out? When you pull it to start it, how long is it? How much of it stays within the machine? Because if you're pulling a lawnmower cord out to wind around somebody's neck, it's not the same thing as pulling the lawnmower cord out to start the motor.
But the most important findings on the lawnmower were to come from the results of irrefutable DNA evidence.
What had quite clearly happened is the toggle, of course, had been used to pull the cable out of the housing on the lawnmower. In order to be able to wrap it round her, and it was wrapped around her neck twice, the only way that that could be done was if you pulled the cord out and then gripped it at the bottom to stop it from going back in, so that you could let it loose between those 2 points in order to wrap it round her neck and then tighten it. So whoever had done it would have had to have gripped the cord in a most unusual place. It's not part of the cord that a user of the lawnmower would normally come into contact with, because it would be right at the bottom of the cord. And that's where his DNA was found. The finding of his DNA wasn't just on the murder weapon, it was on a most important part of the murder weapon, which unusually must have been touched by the person who used it to kill her.
But Mohammadi had an answer again. He claimed there was a good reason for the finding of his DNA.
Well, he used to repair and maintain the lawnmower, he would take the housing off and replace the cable and so on and so forth. And therefore there was a perfectly innocent explanation as to why his DNA should have been on that particular part of the cord. The cord on the old lawnmower had been used to kill her in February 2017. The police were able, in fact, to find the precise date when the new lawnmower was purchased. The old one hadn't been used for about 3 or 4 years. And when it was examined, they didn't just swab the cord, they swabbed all of the parts of the item which a user might be expected to contact. And there was no DNA at all from anyone on any parts of the lawnmower that you would expect to find it. And we had the explanation for that. DNA is a biological material. So this lawnmower has been sat unused in a shed with a hole in the roof for 3 or 4 years. And so over that time, all of the DNA that you would expect to have accumulated on it during the days of its use had degraded and had gone. The absence of any other DNA on the machine demonstrated that that which was found on the cord was recent, because if it hadn't been, it would have gone the way of all of the rest. And it was recent because, of course, it had been used on that day in February 2017 to kill her.
You've got to ask yourself the question, how could it be that Raheem's DNA is there with Leah's DNA, and it's low down on the cord, it's not at the top by the handle, and also there is a total absence of his DNA anywhere else on the mower? So if his argument was that I serviced the mower or the like that, you would expect it to be saturated, which it was not. So that fragile piece is the interpretation, because the cord that's around her neck is naturally going to be rich in her DNA. And it is the person who killed her. Also, you know, the cord has been wrapped and then the toggle has been tucked under the loops. So there was no doubt, you know, there was no mistaking what that individual's intention was.
Finally, Noel and his team had enough evidence to charge Raheem Mohammadi with the murder of Leah Adri-Siyoko. The trial started almost a year after she died in January 2018 at the Old Bailey Court in London.
Mr. Mohammadi was vehement and argumentative. He would seek to engage personally with his questioner, as it were, trying to get into a two-way argument with you. And he would answer questions at great length. I also remember that. He was prickly. He was too clever by half. He had an answer for everything. If you think you're cleverer than you are, it can unravel. And in his case, I think it did. But the thing I remember above all, though, was his vehemence and the level of denial.
But the real insult of Mohammadi's behaviour in court was to Leah's beloved family.
Him trying to say that she treated him like a son. Him saying she thought of me as a son, and I could have killed him. I could have stepped across the courtroom and ended him when he said that. And I'm not proud that I could have quite happily done that. And I think it was at that point I knew he had done it. And at that point I knew he was lying and dissembling and willing to throw anybody under the bus to save himself.
The trial ended after 6 long weeks of distress for Leah's family. But devastatingly, the jury were unable to reach a conclusion.
It was crushing. It was completely crushing. We thought, oh God, what do we do now? And I'm very grateful again to Mr. Price for saying, actually, Mark, this is the second best verdict. Because it means we can do it again. It will happen again. There will be another trial. And it will go right this time.
While it was impossible to know exactly why the jury had been unable to reach a verdict in the first trial, the prosecution team decided on a simpler approach in the second. Without conclusive digital evidence such as CCTV or phone records, John relied more on forensics and the findings of DNA in the mower.
When it came to preparing for the retrial, we learnt a number of lessons. And one of the things which I remember very well that we did is that we ditched some of the evidence that we used at the first trial and didn't use it at the second, and we narrowed things down a bit. We made it a bit simpler. I like to think we made it a bit more focused.
And as it transpired at the second trial in October that year, the prosecution barrister was right. The jury found Rahim Mohammadi guilty of murder and sentenced him to life in prison with a minimum term of 19 years.
There's this kind of flush of relief. It's not a triumphant thing, it's not jubilation, it's not about a win. Nobody wins in any of these cases ever. You think, okay, the right thing has been done. It's not going to make our family better. It's not going to heal the destruction that this thing caused to us and all to everyone around us. It doesn't. It doesn't for anybody. But what it allowed us was the fact that a person who did an horrendous, wicked thing will not be able to do it again.
I learned so much from the family, about their dignity, how professional they were and supportive of the police. How much information you can get from the family was quite remarkable. They were certainly a cornerstone to the investigation.
He's taken away my mother, who brought me up, taught me how to be a decent human being. Someone who helped me feel safe and secure and loved. Me, my whole family, my friends. That's what he took away from me. That's what he took away from the world. Someone who was kind, who gave far more than she took, and was willing to help people all the time. And he took that from us all, and he left us bereft. I miss her all the time.